Dita, how am I putting a net over that house? There's locals all over it.
We go with germs. She took samples from work, pathogens, viruses. It's national security.
Good. Okay, I like that. It plays down. Get it out there. Get it out there.
You got to remember, I was up on all the latest information from China and everywhere else. I knew all about this virus. I knew, I've been watching the videos of people dropping in the street.
What was your thoughts? I mean, since this was a technology that you were a pivotal part of the creation of, and so you're getting this vaccine, you probably were thinking, look at this, all my hard work come to fruition. It's going to protect me from the virus.
I actually said to the nurse when I took the first jab, I bragged a little bit. I usually don't, but I did say, I invented this tech.
Let's take a look at the new kid on the block, mRNA vaccines. What if we could train our immune system to recognize these spikes?
They're saying that the spike protein itself is a class of its own to promote clotting. It directly acts on the clotting mechanisms.
By having our own bodies produce them. To do that, researchers took the virus's blueprint, its RNA, and isolated the part responsible for producing the spikes. Armed with this blueprint, they created mRNA, or messenger RNA. This is a special form of RNA that can enter your cells and give them instructions. In this case, the RNA contains instructions to build the spikes of the coronavirus. Not the virus itself, just the spikes. So mRNA vaccines contain instructions for your cells that tell them to build a part of a virus in large volumes, almost like giving them a recipe to follow. Once this is happening, your immune system kicks into action and starts learning how to attack these intruders.
So let's say you want to change the human body. You want to fix a mistake. You want to repair something, improve something. Well, if you're going to reprogram human genetic material, you need a delivery system, and nothing works better than virus. It's like a suitcase. You pack in genetic mutation, infect the body, and the vector unloads into the target cells. Getting it where you want it, how you want it, is the nightmare, unless you have a map. You've had some very minor alterations made to 2 different chromosomes. The green side, the physical side, is nothing more than a 1.5% rise in your mitochondrial protein uptake.
Mitochondria takes the food that you eat, the fats, the proteins, the carbohydrates, and it makes the ATP that your body needs. But a byproduct of that is oxidative stress. That's the heat around the engine, that if the oxidative stress builds up too much, it can cause problems.
But with 1.5%, you see this immediate increase in cellular tempo, muscle efficiency, oxygenation.
And the blue side?
Intelligence, obviously, but it's more than that. It's neural regeneration and elasticity, sensory function, pain suppression. It's the most exciting development in genomic targeting in the history of the science.
What scientists have discovered and looked at over the years is that there are a lot of consequences to oxidative stress. Less optimal health, inflammation, cancer, dementia, diabetes, and learning disabilities have been tied to oxidative stress in the mitochondria and mitochondrial disability. We talked about oxidative stress associated with COVID-19 infection. The problem is that when the virus infects, binds to that ACE2 receptor, it knocks out that enzyme.
Spike protein, it does not need the ACE1, ACE2 imbalance. It is causing that as well, so that is a separate imbalance. It directly, when it comes in contact with RBCs and platelets, it can start having them be clotted.
The problem is that when the virus infects, binds to that ACE2 receptor, it knocks out that enzyme. And so instead of angiotensin 2 going down and angiotensin 1,7 going up, we have the opposite occur. And so what we have is angiotensin 2 going up, angiotensin 1,7 going down. And not only that, but the virus itself attracts white blood cells, which also has oxidative stress. And so all of these things lead to an increased amount of reactive oxygen species. That's the issue with COVID-19. It's taking patients who have high oxidative stress levels already because they're not optimized, and it's causing them to go over the edge. This is why patients are coming into the hospital, because this reactive oxygen species are damaging the endothelial cells, which line the blood vessels. That causes microclots to occur. That leads to hypoxemia.
My 11-year-old lost one of his front adult teeth 9 months after COVID, a average mild case of kid COVID, mild. There is no mild case of COVID. One of his front adult teeth fell out unprompted with no blood loss from vascular damage to COVID.
So you can imagine the spike protein to be a molecule to cause clotting.
All right, that said, let's talk about what's happening with this hemorrhagic fever outbreak, which, if you know, hemorrhagic fevers, Ebola, and smallpox are types of these.
This is why they called it amyloid clot, because this is an abnormal clot. This is not a healthy clot.
And they're already mass vaccinating people for it.
A molecule to cause clotting. This clot has bad things stuck in it because the clot itself was actually not needed. Of course, we know that eventually they would cause so much of the clotting that clotting factors and the material necessary for clotting will be eaten up, will be consumed. And now patient is in the thrombocytopenic state. Now they're in the bleeding state.
There are also reports of this hemorrhagic fever spreading in Brazil.
Now they're in the bleeding state.
Reports from Xi'an, where the Chinese Communist Party has been locked down. They locked down a city of 13 million people. Keep in mind, like, New York is only 8-point-something million. Bigger city than New York. Again, when it comes to the CCP, you never know it's real or not. They're saying there's now signs of community transmission of hemorrhagic fever, meaning that basically it's a virus and it's spreading. And this is the CCP saying it. Again, so take it for what it's worth. They say it's passing person to person. And if the state-run media acknowledges it, means they have a reason to do it, or it's so big that they can't hide it anymore. It's going to be one of those two things. They claimed the Communist Party is urging quick vaccinations to stop the spread, and Global Times looks like it's basically saying we have it under control, don't worry about it. That's what it's telling people.
So the first clip was something I wondered from the beginning. Was the Wuhan leak intentional to cover up something else? Clotting is a function of COVID-19. Is that by design or by accident? Remember the Syrian war? China was there and has many Middle East connections and partners. Combatants bleed. TXAs, or blood clotting drugs, studies are a real thing. My question is, was COVID-19 originally a failed blood clotting drug before gain of function was achieved? With COVID endemic across the world, the evidence of this would be lost. What else was COVID-19 designed to do? It looks like that question is not being asked, and I don't think anybody's curious about that. Nonetheless, the people with long COVID are not exhibiting super soldier abilities. It's quite the opposite. You can see the list of things in that movie characterizing what would happen when mitochondria was enhanced. They're all the opposite of what long COVID is. So my concerns have been confirmed with long COVID. Long COVID will be an increasing issue with each exposure and limited access to therapies. Cell-to-cell transmission is utilized and evades immunity. A short video I did make on a study about that right out of our own OSU. There were several other studies done before, but for some reason there's not a lot of spotlight or narratives about this. I don't think the media wants to talk about it because it would be contrary to a lot of the popular stuff they're trying to submit in the mainstream media. I think the ugly side of long COVID is just now unraveling, and I hope the hemorrhagic fever in China has nothing to do with advanced long COVID. I put a lot of that information in there to suggest that maybe it could be. And it looks like we will find out in the next few weeks, likely before April. Remember, we were only months behind China with the initial COVID outbreak in 2019-2020. These studies are being done for some reason or another, and we are not under the impression as to why. They're simply asked to do these studies for reasons we will not know why. As expected, it will affect the vulnerable first. My wife has experienced loss of vascular activity several times last month after my last update. And as usual, we took all the things that you would expect us to take that I published, and they seem to be relatively effective. I noticed some slight discoloration once in my own hand, probably a couple of weeks ago. They got a little bit arthritic, both of the hands, but this hasn't been an issue for me really. Just a couple times with her. Now, I don't know if I actually published this in my video, but in 2020, my wife did wake up. We both woke up with one of her arms completely blue, and she was unable to have any function. She had no function in them. Fortunately, after some massaging, they did regain color and movement, and it is something that we are checking out. So these are the type of things that I'm talking about specifically because they're hitting home, and there's been enough family members to really be concerned about this that have had to deal with this, likely have long COVID, and unfortunately, there are going to be a limited amount of therapies that we can use because that is the way things are set up right now.
Exactly. This syndrome of long COVID is complex. It affects nearly all organ systems. The 4 factors that we studied that when measured at the time of acute COVID diagnosis that later predict the development of long COVID were 1, the presence of autoantibodies. These are proteins that the body makes against itself that are pathogenic and cause diseases like lupus. The second was the presence of SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that causes COVID, in the bloodstream at the time of acute diagnosis. The next one was another virus called Epstein-Barr virus, which is the common cause of mono. And the last one was type 2 diabetes. We're very hopeful that our work will be a foundation for developing treatments.
So let's say you want to change the human body. You want to fix a mistake.